So, what if the next European energy powerhouse is not in Berlin, Paris, Brussels, or Silicon Valley? What if it is a Finnish city of 100,000 people? Vaasa has built one of the strongest energy technology clusters in Europe. More than 180 companies, over 13,000 employees, and more than 6 billion in annual turnover. So this is not a story about being big, it's a story about being dense. And that changes how we should think about EU projects, green innovation, regional strategy, and the future of Europe. So don't miss this interview with Tauno Kekäle, senior advisor at Merinova in Vaasa, Finland. Before we go deeper, just a quick practical note. When AI, energy, trade, security, and infrastructure pressures all at once, many organizations freeze. Others move first, and they get the opportunities. You don't want that. You don't want that. Isto está uma merda. Vamos recomeçar. Dois. Before we go deeper, just a quick practical note. When you have pressures from AI, energy, trade, security, infrastructure, green transition, digital transition, everything at once, many organizations will freeze. So many changes, such a chaos. Others will move first, and these will get the opportunities. So you don't want that. You don't want to let that happen to you. So you have the first mover opportunity radar. It helps you map those signals and identify three possible strategic moves for the next 90 days. Immediate, now, before it's too late. It is self-guided, it is practical, and it is designed to be completed in 60 minutes. You can find the link in the show notes. Okay, so welcome back to InnovEU, the EU Project Chronicles. Today I speak with Tauno Kekäle. He is the senior advisor at Merinova in Vaasa, Finland. Merinova is deeply connected to the Energy Vaasa ecosystem, which is one of the leading energy technology clusters in the Nordic region. This conversation really matters a lot. You can't miss it, because many regions in Europe want to become innovation hubs. They want to be green, they want to be digital, they want to attract talent, sorry. They want to attract investors, EU funding, international partners. But many of those ecosystems will make one big mistake. They try to be everything. A bit of AI, a bit of energy, tourism, biotech, circular economy, everything. And often that produces a strategic document. You know, the kind that goes to the bottom of the drawer, not an ecosystem. This is not the Vaasa way. They didn't build it this way. So don't miss the interview. So welcome back to InnovEU, the EU Project Chronicles. Today, I have this great conversation with I can't wait for this conversation with Merinova. Tauno Kekäle is the senior advisor at Merinova in Vaasa, Finland. I hope this is a decent pronunciation. Merinova is very interesting to me. I'm really eager to discuss this experience, because Merinova plays a central role in the Energy Vaasa ecosystem. This is one of the leading energy clusters in the Nordic region. And I find amazing, interesting and impressive numbers online. 180 companies, over 13,000 employees, more than 6 billion annual turnover. Wow. That's something. Tauno, on his side, he has extensive experience in EU networks, in regional development projects, higher education. So I really want to discuss with him how a regional energy cluster can turn the green transition into competitiveness, not the other way around, as a lot of media. It's not a disadvantage, it can become an advantage. Okay, that's my idea, but we'll have to wait.
Yeah.
So Please, Tauno, thank you very much. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for your time. Now, for listeners who do not know Merinova and Energy Vaasa yet, uh, what makes this region special in European energy technology?
We have originally had two companies that have split and split and split and split, and now we have 7 world-class big companies that are making stuff that make energy. Basically, whatever you can think of, nearly whatever you can think of, that makes electricity in the end. Big engines for ships with the generator, with the propeller running on electricity, switches, cables, stuff, everything that has to do with energy, we are making them. So we don't make so much energy, we make stuff for energy.
And tell me, was this the result, the creation of this cluster and all these companies, a lot of companies, how many? 180. Was this the result of a formal, carefully elaborated plan, or was this the result of individual initiatives from companies, universities that came together?
Unfortunately, it's quite random. It has to do with the Second World War, where the big Finnish companies were in the south of Finland and they were bombed quite heavily, and they thought they would like to move farther north away from the bombings. And then it happened that Wärtsilä, engine making manufacturer, and ABB, nowadays ABB, appliance and old electrical things manufacturer, moved both to Vaasa. And in 1970s, they invented the thing that if you put an engine like this and a motor like this, you can generate electricity by running the engine. And that has then split into more and more companies and their suppliers of all kinds. And now the engines run with basically everything that engines can run on, from hydrogen to heavy fuel oil to natural gases and diesel fuels and stuff. And then from the generator, the electricity goes into different devices that also made here to make world light when you switch on the light.
Okay. So what's the role of Merinova in this ecosystem? Are you a coordinator, a project developer, a business support organization? None of these?
Yeah, we actually nowadays all of that. We started as a kind of startup support company for companies that ABB was spinning off. Small suppliers of this and that, departments that made small plastic parts for ABB, for example. They said, go and found your own company, we will buy from you. And then Merinova was founded as a consulting company, helping them with their quality system, management system, maybe new innovations, spin-offs, and premises for new companies. And over time, we got more and more tasks. We are now doing also EU funding, consulting for all kinds of organizations around here. We are doing the cluster management, marketing, some of the marketing of the cluster events and so on. So we've been in this in 35 years, and together with the cluster growing, our tasks have been increasing also.
And you personally, Tauno, how long have you been doing that?
I have been in Merinova now for 5 years, but I was in the board of Merinova for 20 years ago for 7 years. And I've been following that quite closely also from the universities and academia in between.
You know the story, the history very, very well, and you've been following it. Yes. So, Energy Vaasa, I can see it often described as the Nordic leader in energy technology. Why? What do you do right to be in that position?
It comes from the numbers, I think. It's 6 billion anyway, so there's no region with 100,000 people that is making 6 billion anywhere else. The next, let's say 3,000 kilometers around us, or 2,000 miles around Vaasa. So we are big in numbers, even if we are a small place. We make systems rather than devices. Even if I'm saying generator, I'm saying engine. So we are making systems. So if your city wants to have a new part of city built with its own electrical generation, its own electrical system for everything that is needed in there, so you can basically order all of that from Vaasa. From maybe with agreements with 3 or 4 different companies, but everything will come from you.
Yeah, it's complementary.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the green transition. A lot of people talk about the green transition as a challenge, as a climate challenge, yes, but a challenge for the society to cope with that change. Um, for you, it seems also to be an opportunity. How should regions think about that shift?
Yeah, the green transition is decarbonizing, basically. And decarbonizing because of not because of the natural change between winters when carbon is coming out from the rotten trees and summers when the carbon is going into the trees and helping them grow, but the carbon that we are digging from the ground that comes on top of this normal carbon, that is the extra carbon dioxide that makes the world a bit hot on some days and a bit rainy in some days and so on. So you can get rid of that extra need of energy that you are digging oil, coal, and natural gases from underground. You can get rid of that by making everything electric. And the electric is the word that we are happy with. You can make electricity with wind and solar and whatever you invent, but you can also make all the fuels that we are using now with electricity. So instead of the oil that you are digging from the ground, you can make electricity run an electrolyzer that makes hydrogen that you mix with the carbon dioxide that we anyway have too much out of. And that makes more or less methanol that you can put in the diesel engines instead of diesel oil. No digging more oil, but instead you take it from your window, from your sun. And then you even take out some of the carbon dioxide in the fuel mix. So this is what we think will happen in the long run. We are not kind of getting all the money of the world this year or not even next year, but it will take quite a long time, but we will be included in that development all of these years it will take.
That was my question. How far are we from doing that? When we see problems like the ones we have now in the Hormuz Strait, when we see prices at the gas stations, I often wonder how long before we get rid of fossil fuels. I feel we are very far away, are we?
Yeah, we are quite far away. It's been every now and then said that this is the peak oil, that peak oil will start getting less and less from now on, but it's never happened. We always find more oil. And it's still very cheap to drill, even with all the problems of Hormuz. Thing is, we are about the same level of prices we were 5 years ago in filling our cars with the gasoline. And still the hydrogen-based fuels are 3 times that. So until we get rid of the price gap, no normal person, if not threatened by guns or police, will change into the hydrogen-based fuels. Hydrogen-based fuels are still easy because they work in the same way. You go to the gas station and take a pump and you fill the tank of your car and then you drive. So they are easier than electrification of the cars, that where you need to learn some new stuff and buy an expensive car. But still the price difference is so big, so it will take a long time.
Okay, so let me get back to the script of I had prepared. So,
Yeah.
what role do EU-funded projects play in your strategy for your ecosystem?
It's mostly learning. Sometimes we get a demonstrator that is making it easier for us to sell a hydrogen plant, for example. If we have one that you can fly over to Vaasa and have a look at, okay, this is how it works, this is where the hydrogen goes out, and this is where the electricity goes in, and there are the wind powers that are making this, wind propellers that are making this electricity. So it's easier to sell when you have demonstrators. And sometimes EU funds those. They have been sending us some money for the demonstrators, for the plants that we have at the moment. And they are buying some of the hydrogen to their relatively high price just to have a market for that. But they are still not paying everything. So we still need to have the investors that think that this is a short enough time for them to get their money back from paying customers. And the paying customers are what we are waiting for.
For these technology companies in your region, what do they need the most to grow international? Is it funding, people, talent, demonstrations, or as you're saying, regulation? What do they need the most?
I think for the big projects like hydrogen and so on, the the regulation and even regulation that would not change every 2 years would be a good thing. But actually, our companies are selling as much as they can sell. So currently, it seems that the culprit will be the amount of people that we can attract here. So we would need to have more workers in the factories, or then we need to start to source the parts and maybe even the main products from somewhere else.
So people is the constraint.
Yeah, we are only 100,000 still. If you're from Lisbon,
yeah,
and you know how many people live there, it's much more than 100,000 anyway.
It is.
Yeah.
What about SMEs? Where do they usually struggle when they try to enter these global energy markets? What's their main difficulties?
I think the main difficulty is the ramp up, because you get an order from a big producer of something, 100,000 pieces of this, and the small company has a possibility of making 1,000 pieces of this, and you cannot really kind of 100-fold your production very quickly, so you end up delivering only small parts of all the deliveries that the big companies need to have, and you of course grow with them over time, but it will take a long time. And the main culprit there is then all of the small companies are specialists in what they are making. So they have the skill, but they don't have the funding or the resources, let's say, that is missing from them.
Resources in general, but particularly money.
Money, yeah.
Okay. Let's keep talking about energy. You mentioned before the energy systems are becoming electric, more and more, digital, decentralized, but also complex. I believe you may have heard about this blackout in the Iberian Peninsula last year. Does this change the type of innovation that companies need to develop, or maybe I should say that companies can develop? Does this have an impact?
It has had already. We are talking about the resilience of the electric grid quite a lot more. We are not talking so much about the production end. We are talking about the storage end and the leveling of all the loads in the grid and such systems. And I understood that this is maybe the problem that caused the blackout in Spain and Portugal for a year ago. So the grid must be, as you said, become more complex. It must be developed in a whole system rather than just put in there one more thing that produces more electricity and then hope that everything else will survive.
We've heard recently the plans of the European Commission to have huge investment plan on the electric grid in Europe. When I hear that, I believe I always tend to think that, well, that goes to compensate the investments that should have been done in the past decades. Am I right?
Yeah.
Has the grid been neglected?
You're definitely right. The countries and the EU, they are covering for deficiencies in market. It's easy to start a new solar cell because you can directly sell what comes out of that to somebody. There is a customer already. But to sell the grid balance, who would be paying for that? You, when you have a big blackout, but not any other day. And still it must be there to wait for the blackout. It's a bit like fire brigade, that it should be there, somebody should pay for it, and it's not really a business. But it must be there for the blackout day in order to get rid of all the problems that will cause.
One other question that is often raised about the electric grids is cybersecurity. Data, AI, smart grids, all of these nice words that EU projects, EU programs include. But are we making any progress in there, or are our grids vulnerable?
They are still vulnerable, yes. Yeah, they are getting more vulnerable with adding every SCADA or other internet connected system of adding different specifics to the grid. So everything where data comes out from, you can put data in, and you can make all kinds of problems for the users there. And of course, the companies try to compensate by hiring more people there, but we also don't have enough of the data savvy people. It may be easier to find data criminal than to find data.
I hear it pays better. Okay, so let's talk about regions and innovation hubs. I believe every European region wants to be an innovation hub, but not all of them have the success that your region has. Can you somehow identify what are the key ingredients that make a regional innovation ecosystem work,
Yeah,
succeed?
the ecosystem word is one important one. You need to have, if you think of Silicon Valley, let's not talk about Vaasa. Silicon Valley, basically one technology or a huge amount of computer technologies anyway. Everybody is talking the same technology. A
Mhm.
huge amount of people, knowledgeable people connected to the same place. Everybody who's fired from one company starts their own company. And then the companies start to hire from each other like this and like this and like this. And then you have an ecosystem. And then people can phone you and ask whatever they want in computers and they get it from there. We have the same with energy. We have 7 big companies and 100 small companies, and everybody is talking electricity. And of course, the region is much smaller, but that is what works. So it's easiest to have an ecosystem that has one technology, a medicine ecosystem, or electricity energy ecosystem, or computers ecosystem, or metal manufacturing ecosystem, for something like this. So I think the concentration on one technology is the key to start with. And then, of course, the technology must be one that has some suction from the market. So there must be a market that's buying that. Otherwise, it will not grow. Nobody wants to grow something that will not have any kind of business potential.
So if any other European region wanted to learn from Vaasa, that will be the main lesson, numbers and time. Am I right?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, yeah, and you have, for example, in Portugal, there is the tile ecosystem. Nobody
Yeah.
else makes as nice tiles as the Portuguese. It's just kind of something that's not growing that rapidly as electricity is at the moment. But that kind of development is what you get. Skillful people there connected into the ecosystem and to each other and making things together and getting reputation and being asked after.
So in the end, you seem to always be talking about people, about the role people will have. You need people with different experiences, but people who work in the
Uh,
same market or talk the same language. I don't know.
yeah, help each other work. So, for example, that the power station of Wärtsilä, the diesel engine requires the electric generator in the other end. So there are 2 different technologies, but they combine into one, making electricity in places where it's not so easy. But it's people. I have heard of one factory in Japan that was made completely robotic, so that you could switch off the lights and close the doors, and it would make things in the night. But it becomes too stiff. So you cannot make more than 1 or 2 products with that kind of
It
system.
still
So
needs people.
the walls don't make things. The walls don't get much ideas either.
Mhm. Okay, let's talk about the future. Are you optimistic about the next 3, 5 years? Are you optimistic about I mean, European capacity to build stronger ecosystems in the energy sector, which you know better? Are you optimistic about Europe in the next 3, 5 years?
I'm very optimistic, but not in 3 or 5 years. Because if we take a typical hydrogen plant, for example, with the first bureaucracy in the beginning, then the investment waiting, then the building and so on, everything takes more than 5 years.
Mm.
So in 5 years, if something is not started now, it will not be ready in 5 years. And what is started now is the policies of European Union. So in that way, I'm a bit positive. Maybe the policies are ready in 5 years. The
Mm.
policies will be in place and then we start to implement them. But the implementation easily takes 10 years more.
How important is to have a real internal market for energy, which I don't believe we have right now?
Uh, it has its sides. It is complementing the energy production, energy use that is in some areas, and it makes it easy to start your business wherever. If you want to make Europe a place where people can live in many different places, not only in Berlin or Paris or Milano, then you need to have a good grid everywhere.
So, why is Europe apparently? You get that idea from the media. Apparently, the only place in the world where the energy is a problem. I mean, the United States are are independent. They produce more oil more energy than they use. I think I know they produce more oil. I'm not sure about all the energy. Russia exports a lot. Why is energy a problem for Europe?
There's two things. Firstly, you need to have the infrastructure. If you want to use gasoline or if you want to use natural gas, you need to have all the pipelines and stuff there. And then the first thing you need to have is the oil or the gas underground. Which is, I've been driving back and forth with motorbike and car in Europe, and I have not seen many pumps pumping oil anywhere. So we are lacking this, not only the infrastructure, but also behind that we are lacking the material itself. So then we need to start from the other end. We must be the first place where you are not dependent on the gas and oil, and the first place that knows how to make green electricity and make stuff work with that.
Let me just go a little back to your previous answer, because what you said makes me believe, as you know, we are both in peripheral areas of Europe, and what you said makes me believe that it's still an important disadvantage to be in the not as near the center as we are. The peripheral areas are in a disadvantage. Sorry. But for what I've seen, energy is more of a problem in the center, in Germany.
This electrification makes it the other way around, because basically you can make electricity wherever you want. And you can make hydrogen out of electricity wherever you want. You can make the fuels out of the hydrogen, out of the electricity, wherever you want. If you want to make it just outside Lisbon or Braga or somewhere, it's okay. If you want to make it in Finland, that's also okay. You don't have to go where you can drill the oil and then make pipelines from there to all the other places. So the electricity is the decentralized energy, while the gases and fuels of the old type, they are centralized. You have to dig the coal in a coal mine, and it only can be where the coal is.
Mm-hmm. So by that you mean that peripheral regions are not as much in a disadvantage in an electrified world. Is that correct?
Yes, this is what I'm saying.
Okay, that's a positive note. Do you have any final message you want to close the interview with?
Yeah, still we are disadvantaged with the small amount of people and the small amount of money, but that maybe can solved somehow. So, but I think I'm positive. I'm thinking that we will solve this somehow in the coming decades, not in the coming years, but in the coming decades. Everything takes a long time in human systems.
Mm-hmm. That's an important message. We need patience. We need time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for this interview, for your views on the energy and the ecosystems and the innovation and everything. So I hope anyone who wishes to get in touch with you can find you at Merinova, correct?
Yes, Merinova.
We'll have a link in the episode notes. And well, I hope to see you soon again. Thank you for your time.
I hope to see you also. Thanks for the interview.
What lessons did you take from this interview? For me, I take a few lessons. First, an ecosystem is not a list of organizations. It's not a brochure. An ecosystem is a dense field of people and firms that speak the same technological language. That's why Tauno Silicon Valley comparison is so useful. Think about that. Lesson 2, EU projects are demonstrators, not business models. They should reduce uncertainty. They should create learning, build demonstrators. That is exactly how Tauno describes their use of EU funding. Lesson three, the real bottleneck is often ramp up for SMEs, I mean. That is a brutal lesson. Many SMEs do not fail because their technology is bad. They fail because they cannot ramp up. A big client may ask for, let's say, 100,000 units, and they can produce 1,000. The gap is not a small operational detail, it's the valley of death in industrial form. The firm may have the skill, the know how, the right people, but they may not have the capital, the production capacity, certification process, the supplier network, um, everything else necessary for the 100,000 order. And this matters for EU projects. If your project involves SMEs, don't just say they will access new markets, show how they will survive the ramp up phase in your proposal. So, final takeaway. The big lesson from Vaasa is not that every region can become Vaasa. That would be too easy and cold. I'm just kidding. The real lesson is sharper. It's that small regions can win when they stop trying to look big and start becoming dense. What do you mean dense? Dense in skills, in suppliers, in market knowledge, dense in technological change, incredible demonstrators. So the future of European innovation will not belong only to the largest cities. From this example, we can see it will belong to the regions that know exactly what they are for. So there's hope for small peripheral regions like Vaasa. That's the conclusion I like the most, considering where I live, of course. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to InnovEU, the EU Project Chronicles. And check my newsletter, Policy Docs, the Transitions Letter. And share this episode with one cluster manager, one regional policymaker, or one EU project coordinator. So stop trying to be everywhere. Be undeniable somewhere. I'll try to do that. See you next week.